Imagine walking into a room where 5 identical faces are staring back at you. 5 miracles born into a world of poverty, only to be snatched away by the very people who promised to protect them. It leads us to a haunting question that still echoes through the cold corridors of history. When does a human life stop being a miracle and start being a commodity? To find the answer, we must travel back to a dark, freezing night in May 1934, in a remote farmhouse in northern Ontario, Canada. What happened there wasn't just a medical anomaly. It was the birth of the world's first human zoo. The night was pitch black, silent and bitter. Inside a broken farmhouse, a mother was screaming. Dr. Alan Defoe arrived expecting a routine delivery, but as he stepped into the dim light of a flickering oil lamp, the laws of nature seemed to shatter. One baby girl was born, then a second, then a third, a fourth, and finally a fifth. In 1934, the odds of identical quintuplets surviving were 1 in 57 million. They weighed only 10 pounds combined. They were so small they had to be kept warm in a bread oven and fed with eyedroppers. The world called them the miracle babies, a beacon of hope in the middle of the Great Depression. But for the Dionne sisters, Yvonne, Annette, Cécile, Emily, and Marie, survival was the beginning of their greatest curse. As news of the miracle spread like wildfire across North America, the world went into a frenzy. People wanted to touch them, to see them, to own a piece of the miracle. But while the public saw hope, the government of Ontario saw a goldmine. Under the chilling guise of child protection, the Premier signed an emergency order to seize the infants. They claimed the parents were too poor, too uneducated, too unfit to raise such a precious national treasure. The girls were declared wards of the king and moved into a high-security compound built directly across from their parents' home. It was called a hospital, but the barbed wire and armed guards told a different story. It was a prison, and the sisters were now state-owned property. Then, the world witnessed the birth of Quintland. This wasn't just a residence. It was a $500 million theme park, where the main attraction was 5 innocent human beings. Every single day for 9 long years, 6,000 tourists lined up in the scorching sun and the freezing snow just to catch a glimpse. The girls were placed in a playground surrounded by one-way mirrors. They thought they were playing alone in the sunlight, unaware that thousands of hungry eyes were staring at them through the glass, whispering, judging, and treating them like exotic animals in a laboratory exhibit. At its peak, Quintland was more popular than Niagara Falls. It was the ultimate exploitation, fueled by corporate greed. The Dionne sisters became the most famous faces on the planet. Their images were plastered on everything: dolls, cornflakes, condensed milk, and soap. They were the world's first child influencers, generating a fortune that saved the province from bankruptcy. But while the government and corporations were drowning in cash, the girls were drowning in isolation. They were raised by nurses and doctors who followed a strict clinical schedule. They were forbidden from having normal contact with other children, and even their own parents had to book appointments just to see them. They grew up in a world of cameras and cold stethoscopes, never knowing the warmth of a mother's hug or the freedom of a normal childhood. By the time their parents finally won a brutal legal battle to bring them home at age 9, the damage was irreparable. They moved back into a mansion built with their own money, but they were strangers to their own family. Their father was a man broken by resentment. Their mother was a woman they didn't recognize. The miracle had turned their home into a house of shadows and secrets. They had spent their entire lives as products on a shelf, and they didn't know how to be human. They were haunted by a trauma that no amount of wealth could ever erase. As soon as they turned 18, they fled, disappearing into a life of secrecy, desperate to hide from the world that had once paid to watch them grow. Decades later, in 1998, the surviving sisters finally broke their silence. They sued the government and received a $4 million settlement. But as they sat before the cameras, aged and weary, their message to the world was heartbreakingly clear. It's too late. Our childhood was stolen. Money was the monster that ate our lives. Their story remains a chilling testament to the darkness that hides behind the mask of the public good. It forces us to look in the mirror and ask, how far are we willing to go for entertainment? Who really pays the price for our curiosity? The Dionne Quintuplets were a miracle of nature, but they were a tragedy of man. Their story isn't just history, it's a warning. As we move into an age where every moment of a child's life is captured for the world to see, we must remember the 5 sisters who lived behind the glass. If this story left you with questions, you aren't alone. Tell us in the comments, Do you think the government ever truly intended to save them? Or was it a $500 million lie? Stay curious, stay questioning, and don't forget to subscribe for more hidden chapters of our dark past.